Great to see you. We are in week 4, final week of our message called Committed, Building Strong Relationships in a Fractured World. We started out in week 1 for those who are single, desiring to one day be married, and that one was called I Will. And then we talked in the next week about the importance of our vow. That was called I Do. Last week was kind of the after marriage, what in the world did I get into? And it was called I Did. All right. And this week we are moving on to how do we maintain a healthy marriage relationship for the long haul with a message called I Am. And most of these rules apply far beyond marriage. They apply in every relationship. Okay, some of these are specific to marriage, but they apply, to relationship between siblings, between parents and kids and parents, between friends. Many of these things apply, and so you'll all have things that you can grab hold of. After you've been married for a while, things change. A husband and wife, they rush into a dentist's office, and the wife says to the dentist, I need you to pull an infected tooth, and we're in a hurry, so I don't need any Novocaine or anything, just pull the tooth. And he said, well, that's very brave of you, ma'am, but I need to look at the tooth first. She looks at her husband and says, show him the tooth. Things change, don't they, after you've been married for a while. But we're really excited about this message. And I'll tell you, I shared something a week ago, but I need to share it again because the greatest insurance policy for staying married, if you want to incorporate something that's very simple and easy to understand and simple and easy to do, that will be the best insurance policy out there for a lasting marriage, it's this. The greatest insurance policy, number 1, read the Bible and pray together daily. And number 2, attend a Bible teaching church together weekly. Those two things, there was a big study done. I think it was by the Southern Baptist Convention. It might have been by George Barna, who does religious studies, but it was a huge study. And this was done a number of years ago. And the divorce rate that they found for couples that attended a Bible teaching church weekly, read the Bible and prayed together daily was 4%. So even with a margin of error, it's an astounding way for you to build strength into your marriage. And for those of you who've never read the Bible before, I would recommend that you not start at Genesis. Genesis is interesting. You'd enjoy Genesis and Exodus, and then you're going to get to Leviticus, and you're going to find that it's just kind of lots and lots of pages of lots and lots of pages. But I would start in the book of John if I were you, and then just go through the New Testament, and then maybe start in Genesis after that. But this is the final message today. I am committed, all right? And I asked Pastor Josh, because men are called to be leaders in the marriage relationship, and I asked him, he does a lot of our counseling, to give me 3 things that husbands could do to add strength to our marriages. And these are his top 3 that he gave me. Number 1, he said, pray with your wife. And you pray for her, yes. Always pray for her, but men, pray with her. Hold her hands, pray out loud. God will bless you. He also said, date your wife often. Life gets crazy between kids and, business things and work, other priorities. And we need to intentionally set aside that time to pursue our relationship with our wives. Busyness can just literally suck the life out of a marriage. And so if you want intimacy, men, you have to date your wife. Take the lead. Plan an evening at least once a month to connect with your wife. I shared at the marriage retreat this weekend that one of the things that I never enjoyed, was being the one to find the babysitter, to call, to arrange it, to make the reservations, at the restaurant, to make a reservation at a hotel. Never have enjoyed that, but I want you to know something. I enjoy the benefits of that. And I've done it for decades, all right? I take that initiative, men, not because it's fun for me to do, not because I want to do it, but because it blesses my wife. That's why I do it. So take the initiative. And then third, Pastor Josh says, learn her love language. Well, by love language, we're just talking about the way that we communicate love most often to those around us and the way that we like love to be communicated to us. And a guy named Gary Smalley wrote a book years ago, and he talked about 5 love languages: quality time, affectionate touch, acts of service, words of affirmation, and gifts. If you didn't get those written down, don't worry, we'll go over those things again. But it was really interesting because I had already carved out the outline for this message before Pastor Josh sent me this email. And then as I went through the main points, I had 4 points listed, and they're just directly covering actually all 5 of those, because one of them I had split in 2, and I was like, oh my, I didn't even realize, okay, in talking about things that we can do to maintain a strong, healthy marriage. So again, what do? How do we keep the fire burning, right? God's passionate. God is passionate about romance in marriage. He says in Proverbs 5:18, be happy, yes, rejoice in the wife of your youth. Song of Solomon says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Your expressions of love are better than wine. See, God wants these fires of romance to burn brightly. That's what he wants. And, every boy is attracted to fire. This is just like a moth to a light bulb, okay? We don't have any problem being attracted to fire. And men and women both, in the early stages of a relationship, God provided the spark, right? God created man, and then he created woman. And for the first time, looking at man and woman together, God said, this is very good. Do you get that? God looked at the woman he created and gave to the man as his partner and said, whoa, I've done a very good thing here, all right? And so God provides the spark, but in the early stages, we're really good at adding fuel to those fires of romance. But the problem is that often the pressures and the responsibilities of life start piling up, and we stop fueling those fires of romance. And I'll just tell you a few things that can really put out the fire. And this is specifically talking in marriage, but this is true in a lot of relationships as well. But one of the first things that will extinguish that fire is criticism. Proverbs 12:18 says, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And you want to make it your life goal within the context of your marriage, but in the context of your life as a whole, to catch people doing good, all right? Make that a life goal. You don't want to catch people doing the wrong thing. You want to catch people doing the right thing, and you want to immediately speak life into them because you're catching people doing good. That's particularly important in marriage. Okay, it's an easy thing to nitpick and to point and to find all of those areas where we would have liked something to be done a little differently, or in our mind a little better or a little faster or whatever. Instead of criticizing, catch your spouse doing great things. Notice, start sitting up and noticing all of the things that happen that perhaps you've never ever committed or for. Criticism, man, it just can extinguish romance. I mean, you know, and men know this very, very well because you've seen the lights go out. Zing, just like that, right? And you can't take it back. I mean, in our minds, we can take it back, but in her mind, it's lasting and lasting and lasting, right? And that's just, it's a difference in wiring. Second is a lack of appreciation can just put out the fire in your marriage. In 2 Timothy 3:1 and 2, God said there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, and ungrateful. Notice he lists a lack of gratitude in these terrible things. He said it's going to be terrible. Ungrateful. God expects you to express your thanks. Okay, continuously, regularly. You express it to your spouse every day, multiple times a day. A third thing that'll put out the fire is exhaustion. You know, in Matthew 11:28, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." In fact, he says he'll give us rest for our souls. And there's an inner peace and a resting and an exhaling and a freedom from being knotted up inside in worry that he can give us. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be utterly physically exhausted at times. And I'm talking about a tangible rest that you have to have. Because if you're just plain tired, all right, that really puts a damper on romance. And I would say especially to those of you moms who have tiny ones, you have to make sleep a part of your multitasking, right? You have to get that in when you can get it. So you know, if you don't feel like you have to be doing something all the time. If you know, like put in a load of laundry, then go take a nap. But you know, time when you put the kids down for their nap to a time when something else can be happening. But you have to take that time. You have to make it. Nobody's going to give it to you, and you know how tough it is, especially if you have little ones that get you up at night, and just the exhausting part of caring for kids. It's tough. But for all of us, all right, life circumstances and the demands on us can just lead for us to be exhausted. Put the phones away at night. Put the electronics away and rest. Rest, okay? And then a fourth thing that will really dampen our relationship and the romance is simply wrong priorities. And ultimately, every wrong priority is because one or both have themselves at the top of the pyramid. Okay, that's what it is. If there's a wrong priority in my marriage, it's because I'm putting me, okay, first. And that's not a right priority. God says, listen, me first, and your spouse, in the context of marriage, your spouse is next, and then you're beneath that, all right? This is your priority list. And then people will, well, yeah, great. So what's in that for me? Am I ever going to get anything for me? And the answer is absolutely, because your spouse has the same priorities. She's putting you ahead of her. And so what happens is you start having these zany, upside-down arguments in your marriage that are so cool, because she'll be saying, hey, you know what? You need to go and do this because this is an opportunity, and you're looking at what that's going to cost, and you know she'd really like to do this, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's go and do this thing that you know is going to bless her. And she said, no, you need to go. And it's just a beautiful thing, because you start watching out for one another all the time, because each of you has placed the other one ahead of yourself. All right? So, what does God have to say? What does it mean, men, to love your wife? In Ephesians 5:25, God said, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Well, here's something that we have to understand. Christ's love for us, for his church, was not based upon his feelings. All right, it didn't feel good for him to go to the cross. It didn't feel good for him to be whipped and beaten. His love was based on something much, much deeper, a commitment that was much deeper than his temporary feelings, right? So that's the kind of love that we need to have for our spouses. There was a woman who, at her 50th wedding anniversary, a younger woman asked her, what was the secret to staying married so long, 50 years? And she said, well, I decided, before my wedding day, I decided that there were 10 things that if he did it wrong, I would just forgive him and let it go. And the woman says, wow, I'd like to have a copy of that list. What were they? And she said, well, I never got around to writing them down, and I can't remember. But every time he did something that made me hopping mad, I said, lucky for him, that's one of the 10. And so, it's just about letting it go, right? Letting it go. Letting it go. So 5 fuels now for maintaining the fire in your marriage. 5. The first one is kind words. Express your love often. Speak with kindness. That's your word, it's your look, it's your tone. Proverbs 18:21 says, the tongue has the power of life and death. Many of us learned as children, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And of course, the problem with that is that it's a lie. Sticks and stones, they seldom really hurt you. You get over that. But you remember those words. You remember them throughout a lifetime. They pierce, right? We want to use kind words. And also, we want to make sure that we're encouraging one another. To encourage means literally to give courage. In other words, when you encourage your spouse, what you're doing is you're building up your spouse so that they are able to face life's difficult circumstances with a victorious heart and spirit, because you are encouraging. You're giving them something tangible that they need. Proverbs 12:25 says, anxious hearts are very heavy, but a word of encouragement does wonders. And women, you have no idea how powerful your encouragement is in this area of romance. You might be the most, from a worldly standpoint, the most intelligent, the most powerful, the most financially secure woman in the world. But I'll tell you, if you're wise, you will never stop telling your husband how much you need him and how wonderful he is and how much you believe in him. All right? You want to continue with that. And also, in terms of kind words, you want to be really liberal. You want to shower each other with compliments. Proverbs 16:24 says, pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and healing to the bones. True story, this psychologist, Dr. George Crane, Had a woman who came to see him who was seeking a divorce, and she said, I hate my husband. I don't appreciate the way he treats me, and I want to hurt him as badly as I possibly can. This is what he said to her. He said, well, if you really want to hurt him, this is what you should do. Start showering him with compliments. Tell him you love him. Tell him what a good husband he is, and how after all these years you're glad you're married to him. Write him little notes of appreciation. Then after a few months, when he thinks everything is going great, start the divorce action. Well, the result was exactly what the psychologist expected, but it wasn't at all what the woman expected, because after 3 months she was madly in love with her husband and she didn't want a divorce. You see, once she did what love required, even though she didn't feel like it, when she did what love required, her feelings followed those actions of love. Those feelings of love followed the actions of love. She just decided, she was doing what love required. She didn't even realize it, and she fell in love again. And husbands, this is a two-way street. I have yet to meet a woman who said, I'm just so tired of my husband telling me how wonderful I am. That just wears me out. He's just always telling me how good I just wear. I haven't met that woman yet, and and I don't think I will, right? A second way that you can maintain these fires of romance are, someone just smiled at me that says, hey, I get a lot of that, I know. Affectionate touch. I recommend a long hug. In fact, some of you maybe have gone, come to me for marriage counseling in the past, and one of the things, particularly if there's a lot of tension, one of the things that I would require is for a husband and wife to hug for 1 minute on my watch, okay? For 1 minute, and here's what happens, because there's already conflict and it's already tense, and that hug is there. It's almost like two porcupines, that's just bristling, right? And then after about 20 seconds, there's an exhale and a settling in. Okay, and then they just hold, and in those last 20 seconds, they start to remember why they fell in love and why they married one another. See, there's a lot of power in affectionate touch. I encourage you, to hug. I encourage you to give each other a shoulder rub. Hold hands when you walk. My wife, when we got engaged, I was up here in the military. My family lived outside, and because I wasn't able to get leave, and she wanted to meet my family before the wedding, so she flew out by herself to meet my family. Yeah, she was brave. And when she came back, she said, I can't believe your mom and dad still hold hands. And then she said, and they kiss in front of me. Right? That affectionate touch. Yeah. Growing up, that's what we saw. My dad and mom still hold hands. Right? They still kiss. That's a part. It's an important part of maintaining that relationship. And wives, I'll tell you, if you're sitting next to your husband right now, just grab his bicep right now and say, you're so strong. Wives, do that right now. Do it right now. Okay. Now you think you're not getting mileage out of that, but let me tell you, you are. You're getting mileage out of that. Okay? For goodness sake, let him open the pickle jar and squeeze him on the arm. Okay? Third, make time to be alone together, okay? Now, I'm not talking alone time. I need to be off apart from my spouse. Make time to be alone together. See, why wasn't this a problem when you were dating, this alone time? Because then you made the time. You would get up early, you'd stay up half the night, you'd drive hundreds of miles, you'd do whatever it took. See, you need to make the time, right? Our lifestyles are so often designed to kind of pull us apart, and we have to make that time with one another a priority. And this can even be in the house where you break away with one another. Children can be taught to respect this time. When they're tiny, you can have your time together after they go to bed. But for the long haul, you have to plan this regularly. You should have alone time together every single day. Wives, get up in the morning with him. Share a cup of coffee and pray together. If he gets up too early for you, then go back to bed after he leaves. All right? Or take a walk together at the end of a day. Do the work and spend the money that it takes to have a night away every so often. It's worth the cost. It's worth the effort. When my four of my kids were tiny, They were 2 and under, all in diapers at once. And for me to get a night away with Laura, and I planned these things and I did it, but I would have to find 3 families to farm out the kids, because I could get usually one family that would take Hunter and Sarah. They were both toddlers, but then the babies were 3 months apart. And so I'd have to get one family to take one of the babies and another family to take another one. And I still did that multiple times a year. Okay, it was a lot of work. It took a lot of effort. And I want to tell you, it was so worth it. And for those of you, who are highly overprotective of your children, okay, and your babies and your little ones, and you've never had time alone since the baby was born, I'm going to tell you, it's time for you to get over that. All right? My wife and I, when our kids were that age, we were like, take them. Okay? You have to get past that. All right? Because what you have to be careful is that child then is preventing you from investing properly in your marriage when you have a wrong priority there. It doesn't mean, this is not a hard thing to do. And again, it's not all the time, obviously. Okay, but you can do it. You can do it, and you'll be glad that you did it. All right, it'll pay big dividends for your marriage. Okay? Fourth, give meaningful gifts, small gifts. Learn what the other person loves. Some love to have, flowers delivered, or wives, their favorite chocolates. It might be tickets to a play. It might be a coffee card, or bringing them a coffee. It might be taking her shopping to buy something to wear on a date night. It might be buying him something that you've seen him look at 100 times, and he just keeps walking away. He wants it. He just keeps looking at it, right? And walking away. And it doesn't have to be something giant. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It needs to be the cumulative intention of your heart. Little tiny things, right? That just say, I love you and I've been thinking about you, right? And I notice the things that you like. It's a really, really good thing. And husbands, even though it doesn't make sense to many of us, there are actually some wives who don't get excited about a new shotgun, right? And so when you're get gifts that excite her, not gifts that excite you. And by the way, not every woman's excited about getting a vacuum cleaner either from you, okay? So you have to know your wife, all right? You have to know the one that you're giving to. And then fifth is to serve and keep on serving. Again, we go back to Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Well, what does that mean? How did Christ love the church? Well, Jesus said this about himself in Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man, that's him, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus came to serve, and Jesus came to give his life. And then husbands, we're told to love our wives as he loved the church. And what did he do? Well, he came to serve, not to be served, to serve, and to give his life. He says, love your wives that way. Open the doors for her. Carry the groceries. Take out the trash. Do the dishes. Set the table. Fold the laundry. Hang pictures on the wall. A servant does whatever's needed. Whatever blesses, right? Whatever makes things better. And wives, serve him. 1 Peter 3:5-6 says, for this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves, used to make themselves beautiful. This is how the holy women of the past who put their trust in God, and you want to be a holy woman of the present who puts her trust in God. And here's how the holy women of the past who put their trust in God made themselves beautiful. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You see, it was a mark of honor, a mark of holiness for a godly woman to take pleasure in serving her husband, to take pleasure in saying, I belong to him. That they took pleasure. In fact, from the standpoint of how we're created again, men need wives, what you bring to the table. We need that serving that God has created you and blessed you and gifted you to do. We're better husbands when you're committed to serving us. Marriage done God's way is a very, very good thing. Each one of us who are married, everyone who will be married one day, we have the ability to love and to serve our spouse unconditionally, unreservedly, wholeheartedly until Jesus comes or until he takes us home. Imagine with me for a moment that marriage is like it's like swimming across the ocean, or not all the way across. Maybe you're 3 miles out from shore, and you're swimming, and you can see the shore. And there are times when you're exhausted, but the water's flat, calm, and the sun is shining, and you can roll over on your back. You can almost take a nap because it's just so peaceful and still and nice. And there are times in your marriage when it's just like that. You just rest in it. You're enjoying it, and it's just good. And there are other times, okay, when that current is pushing you away from shore, and the water's choppy, and you're fighting hard and hardly making any progress and swallowing water, okay, every time that you take another stroke and you feel like you're not getting anywhere. There will be times like that. There will be times when you're in a groove and you're swimming hard and you just see you're making progress. You're really doing it. And then there are other times when you're going to feel like, man, I'm just not getting anywhere out here. But here's the deal. You can see the shore. You're still out, miles off from the shore. In all of those circumstances, whether it's hard or whether it's easy, whether you're making progress that you can see or it looks like you're going backwards, in all of those circumstances, there's one common denominator, one common factor, and that is you keep swimming. Because what's the alternative? Right? The alternative is to drown. You keep swimming. And in the context of marriage, there are going to be times that are really rough, and times when we feel like we're moving backwards, and times when we feel like everything's against us and battling us as we're swimming. But listen, keep swimming. Just keep on swimming. Because that destination is there, and you can see it. And one day you are going to hear the words, "Well done. Well done. My good and faithful servant, well done," because you continued. You could see the mark. You could see the goal. And even when it was tough, you continued. All right, that's so important for us. A partner for sharing life is a gift from God. A precious gift, a sacred gift. Because in the human marriage relationship, when we are at our best, the world sees a reflection of how Christ loves, of how he loves the church. When we love and cherish our husband, ladies, and when you love and cherish your wives, and when you serve one another, and when you speak with kindness and acts of service, and you're always thinking of the other, what you're doing is you are giving, when we're at our best, we're giving a picture of the love of Christ for humanity. This is what he did for all of us. This is the desire of Christ, that we would enter into relationship with him. This is why Paul says, though it's a mystery, he talks about marriage and then says, I'm talking about Christ and the church. The relationship when we're at our very best, it just looks very, very similar to God's relationship with the church. I know that for many, many people, you find yourselves in a place where you're doing all the swimming and your spouse isn't putting the same amount of work or effort into it. And of course, we understand there are times when people simply walk away and there's not a single thing that you can do about it. The important thing for you to remember, okay, is that marriage is not 50-50, okay? If it's going to be successful, it's 100-100, okay? You both have to give everything. And during those times when things are difficult, it is as important, or perhaps even more important than at any other time, that you continue to give everything. You just continue to give everything that you have, with a right heart, with a right spirit. Trust the Lord with it, but continue to love your spouse the way that you promised God you would. God will bless you through that. Will God force someone else to change their decisions, to change destructive behaviors? We know that he won't do that. But he will bless you. He will strengthen you. He will give you, in the midst of that trial, he will give you a level of peace that is just beyond the world's ability even to understand. Continue swimming. Continue going for the mark. You can do this thing. For those of you who maybe have never Um, Maybe you've never been in a church that preaches out of the Bible before. I remember my first time. I was an adult. I was in the military, thousands of miles from home. Um, I don't know what your background is. For some of you, maybe you don't have any kind of religious background at all. But the simple reality of the Christian faith is that Jesus said that he came to seek and to save the lost. And he began to preach and to teach. And he was preaching what the Bible calls the gospel. It's a Greek word. It means good news. And the good news follows bad news. In fact, the good news is really good because the bad news is really bad. And the bad news is that we're all sinners. And because of our sin, we are separated from a holy God. The impure separated from the pure. The unholy separated from the holy. And yet God was not content to leave us separated from him for eternity. And so God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him, in Jesus Christ, would not perish, but have everlasting life. Christ died on the cross to pay for your sins, specifically you, knowing that you would be sitting here in this church today. And he died for you. And if you have never at a moment in time asked him to forgive you and to save you, if you've never surrendered your life to him, but you believe that he told the truth, you believe he's the crucified and risen Savior of the world, then we want to give you that opportunity right now, right here, to ask him to forgive you and to save you. We'll all pray along with you. Just bow and pray this simple prayer right now. Pray with me. Jesus, I do believe you're the Son of God. I believe that you died on a cross to pay for my sins and the sins of the whole world. And I believe you rose again. I confess to you that I'm a sinner. I've said and thought and done so many things that are wrong, and I know that I'm guilty. I'm asking you, Jesus, please forgive me. And Jesus, I'm asking you to make me clean, to make me new. I'm asking you to adopt me to be a child of God. I'm asking you to save me. And here and now, I surrender my life to you. And by faith, because you promise, in your word, you promise, I'm receiving the gift of forgiveness and a brand new life. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for speaking truth into my heart today. Thank you for saving me.